afternoon, everybody. I'm Peter Lindstrom, chairing the Environment Committee this afternoon, and I'll call the meeting to order. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved there, Chair.
Second?
All in favor say yes.
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 Aye.
Thank you for keeping me on track on that. All in favor, let's try that again. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right. I think it passed. Let's go to the second item. Minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. That takes us to our one and only consent agenda item, which is the City of Maple Grove. They have their 2040 comp plan and comp sewer plan. Is there a motion to approve the
Wait.
consent?
Wait a minute.
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got two agendas before me. Sorry about that.
Use the correct one, please.
I must have been looking at an older one. Whoa, let's get rid of that pile and move over to this pile.
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of the comp plans, or the comp plan and comprehensive sewer plans for the cities of Egan and Mayer.
Egan and Mayor. Two
Well,
items on
second
our
that,
consent
yes.
agenda. Has
Second
been,
those two
motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, very good. And let's see, I believe we have our folks who are presenting on our very next item. And so come on down to talk about the high-strength waste hauling services. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Environment Committee. My name is Heidi Hutter. I'm the Principal Engineer in the Technical Services Plant Engineering Group. This afternoon, I will present Business Item 2020-68SW for high-strength waste hauling services. MCES provides high-strength waste hauling services to transport concentrated dairy waste from Kemp's LLC, located in Farmington, Minnesota, to the Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant for digestion. The current contract is almost spent. These services are required by the 10-year industrial pretreatment service contract between the Metropolitan Council and Kemp's. It's not working. The 10-year industrial pretreatment services contract between the Metropolitan Council and Kemp's was executed in 2018 under the council-approved Industrial Pretreatment Incentive Program. Under the contract, Kemp's installed a new RO membrane system on its site using council bond money. Kemp's will repay the loan over a 10-year period, and they'll receive a discount of up to 30% on the loan payments based on their demonstrated strength reduction. Clean water that passes through the RO system can be used as wash water on site, and the retentate that's captured by the RO system is what's known as high-strength waste. That waste is hauled to the Empire plant by the Metropolitan Council for digestion. Thank you very much. Kemp's RO system has been in operation for just over 1 year. In the first year of operation, Kemp's has had an average strength reduction of greater than 95%, which has made them eligible for a full 30% discount
That mic doesn't work well. So let's take this chair.
on their loan repayment.
Just a few technical difficulties.
All right, we can roll with it.
I can't get the right agenda in front of me. And now the microphones don't work. There's nowhere to go but up from here.
At the Empire plant, the hauler fills the receiving station directly, which is the image you see on your right. And then high-strength waste is then metered into the existing digester feed stream located nearby. Digesting the high-strength waste reduces energy requirements at the plant, and it increases digester gas production. Digester gas is currently used as fuel for boilers to produce heat for on-site use. In an upcoming project, we will be constructing a combined heat and power system that will use that digester gas as fuel to produce both heat and electricity for on-site use. Next slide, please. 3 bids for high-strength waste hauling were received on January 16, 2020, ranging from $1,598,740.00 up to $2,427,930. The Office of Equal Opportunity did not set a Metropolitan Council underutilized business goal due to the limited subcontracting opportunities available for the specific type of work. Schlamka's Vac Truck Services was determined to be the lowest responsible bid at $1,598,740.00. Next slide, please. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that the Metropolitan Council authorize execution of Contract 19P371 with Schlamka's Vac Truck Services, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $2 million for a period of 5 years for hauling high-strength waste from Kemp's LLC, located in Farmington, Minnesota, to the Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant for digestion. Next slide, please. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a really basic question. For 8 years of my life, I worked as a truck driver, so I kind of understand shipping a little bit. So I'm just wondering, why is it Met Council's responsibility to haul that waste? And is it, and a little bit more on that, is it hazardous waste? What kind of waste is it?
Sure. Mr. Chair and members of the Environment Committee, the waste is not hazardous. It is an MPCA other regulated substance, so it is not classified as hazardous. It is like a milk product that you're hauling. Sorry, what was the first part of your question again?
Why is it Met Council's responsibility to haul it?
Oh, we have an existing contract with Kemp's, and part of that contract stipulates that we will do the hauling as part of that agreement.
And then a follow-up question.
Please.
So it's our responsibility to find a contractor to do that because of that contract.
That's correct.
I think it'd be interesting. I was trying to recall if we had a broader information item or overview on the IPIP program, and because clearly I think there's some expenses for us related to it, but there's some overall benefits for us being in this agreement as well, in terms of not having to add capacity, I'm guessing, to our plants, not having to add equipment to deal with this this material, and so there's some cost savings for us as well as some expenses. We're seeing one of the expenses before us this afternoon, but to have this broader overview to show not only about what Kemp's is up to, but what Michael's Foods is up to, and maybe some potential other companies that could participate, or what we're doing for outreach, or just like a broad overview about the whole program, I think I would be interested in that at some point in the future. And please expand. If I said anything that was off track or anything you want to add, please do so.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, I just wanted to add that the requirement is added to the contract for us to haul because we want all of the RO retentate, that concentrated substance, because we will produce more digester gas. It it adds to our financial benefit. When we make electricity, we'll produce a lot more electricity, and I believe Heidi did a calculation that says up to a third of the plant's power demand that will then generate on site. It'll reduce power purchase.
And so that's less of a check that we're cutting to Excel, to the utility. So there's savings for us in that aspect. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick mathematical question. Does the 2 million include the 30% discount? Or would you be coming back to us at some point for an adjustment on that?
Mr. Chair and members of the Environment Committee, the 30% discount is related to a completely separate contract.
Okay.
And I apologize
Okay.
if I wasn't clear enough on that.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. So it looks like there is benefits to cutting the cheese because you get some value out of that.
Boom.
And then the other question I had is that, like, I know it shows like disadvantaged business participation, and I may not be current, but I think Schlumpka is considered a small business that's local and that kind of thing in the area. So I'm wondering if they would be considered disadvantaged business since it is a small business under our guidelines. I'm just wondering about that.
Mr. Chair and members of the Environment Committee, to my knowledge, they are not considered a disadvantaged business under our guidelines.
Okay. Thank you.
Please.
Move approval of the staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this agenda item.
You wanted it?
It's in my district.
All in favor say aye. Or is there any other further discussion on that motion?
I was just quibbling over who got to make the motion, Mr. Chair, since it's in my district, but I was beaten.
Wow.
I'll withdraw my second and you can make it.
Let's just go ahead and
Wow.
vote, it's fine.
Big debate at the Environment Committee. Jeez, could arm wrestle over it. Okay, we'll go with the motion as is. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay? Carries. Thank you very much. Look forward to further conversations about this great program. And that takes us to our information item, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan update. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Guthrie Byard. I am the Council's ADA and Title VI Administrator. Going to present on the ADA Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan and give you an update along with my colleague Dan Fick, who is a Principal Engineer with Environmental Services and part of our ADA team that led the Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan effort. Next slide. So objectives today, just want to share with you an overview of the ADA and our requirements for a self-evaluation and a transition plan as under Title II of the ADA being a falling under as a state or local government, and then highlight the ADA and accessibility survey that we sent out to staff and community members. There's a public participation component, and so we wanted to make sure that we got robust feedback from both staff and community members. Share some of the highlights from the reports that we received, and being that this is the Environment Committee, specifically regarding the environmental services facilities that fell under this self-evaluation, and then detail that transition plan and next actions for that plan and what that means for the council and its work going forward. Next slide. So a little bit of background. As I mentioned, under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which will be 30 years old this year, state and local governments are required, those that have 50 or more employees are required to conduct a self-evaluation. This means they need to do essentially an ADA compliance check of their facilities and their programs and services to identify areas where remediations are needed, where they're not in compliance, what fell under this self-evaluation was all of our public and support facilities, and that included all of our environmental services facilities, and also included several facility-connected bus stops. So there's certain, park and rides and transit centers that have bus stops, so those fell into this evaluation as well. And this work was conducted by JQP Incorporated. It's a local organization, a small organization that actually falls under our MCUB program. So this is a small woman-owned business, really the premier accessibility specialists in the state, the experts in this. And the self-evaluation lasted roughly 6 months, starting June of 2019 and finishing at the end of the year. And those results that they provided were facility specific. So for each of those facilities, which I'll talk about a bit more, specifics, included a report listing all of the barriers that were identified, as well as a priority level for severity. And in addition to that, citing specific codes. So JQP Incorporated not only referred to the ADA and the most recent standards, which are the 2010 ADA standards, but also the Minnesota Accessibility Building Code, which oftentimes is more strict than the ADA and really what building officials build to in our state, because that's what is, what architects and designers and the construction crews build to, because building officials can enforce the Minnesota Accessibility Building Code. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share a few of the things that the council has undertaken over the last few years. So we certainly didn't wait for the self-evaluation. As I mentioned, the ADA is 30 years old. In piecemeal fashion, we've done some self-evaluation. So the plants themselves in the 90s were evaluated. All of our bus garages at that time were evaluated as well, but certainly not all of the council facilities, and it didn't lead to a formal transition plan. So my role is a new one for the council. I've been in my position just over a year. So the council hadn't had somebody in my position before really leading this effort. So this was the first kind of full undertaking of this work. However, there's quite a few staff members that understand our compliance under the ADA and the Minnesota Accessibility Building Code. So some of this work had already been occurring. So there's been several restriping and signage projects at our parking facilities, several what's called ADA pads. So if you take public transportation, you'll notice that in some of our spots right next to a bus stop, there's a clear landing area that's really for people with mobility devices, and certainly those that need to use the lift. So it allows for a space for that lift from that bus to go down. And so we're really making sure that we have those clear spots at the bus stops that are available for that. Also, in particular with the environmental services facilities, power-assisted doors have been installed over the years and will continue to be, to ensure that people can access those facilities. And then additionally, including this room, we have inductive hearing loops installed. So all of our major public hearing rooms, conference rooms, there's hearing loops installed. This ensures that people who have T-coil hearing aids are able to fully participate without having to disclose their disability. They don't need any additional assistive listening devices. They're able to just connect essentially wirelessly and be able to fully participate. Next slide. So public engagement, as I mentioned, this is a requirement under Title II, and so we wanted to make sure that we got staff and community input. So over the summer, we conducted several listening sessions with community agencies, in particular those that advocate with individuals with disabilities, and in particular those who utilize our transit services, and it also helped to better inform community members about the breadth of the work that the council does. And so many people didn't know about environmental services. So this is a great way of talking to them about, for instance, the public tour routes that were evaluated and then getting some feedback from those who actually had taken tours. The listening sessions, as I mentioned, occurred during the summer, and then also this survey was sent out. What that has led to, I'll talk about some of the specifics of that survey, but essentially is that was incorporated into the transition plan, which is available for public comment right now, and it's on our website. We just put together an ADA and accessibility webpage, the first of its kind for the council, that really details what the council is doing around ADA compliance efforts and more broadly accessibility. So there's a link to the draft plan and ways for people to comment on that. And that's open until February 21st of this year. So ADA survey findings. So what we wanted to know is people's perception of the accessibility of our programs and services, not just transit. So as you may surmise, a lot of people associate the Metropolitan Council, if they know of and have heard of the council, with Metro Transit. Most people identified council programs and services as accessible. However, for those that felt that there was limited accessibility where they didn't feel like they could fully participate in the council's offerings, oftentimes the responses were that there was a lack of good or accessible information about programs and services. There was a distance from public transportation, so they physically couldn't get to their bus stop. Crowded public transportation, identifying parks as not being accessible, also limited funds for our housing work. And then in particular, something that is increases each year is snow removal and access to our public transportation due to the limited space that we have and where we can put snow removal and collaboration with municipalities on where that snow goes and whose jurisdiction that falls under. Interestingly, so of the 160 staff and the nearly 500 community members that filled out this survey, more staff felt that our services and programs weren't accessible. So this included environmental services staff, which I thought was really enlightening. And also in my role, something that is encouraging, because then I already have some buy-in. I have people who are looking, who are seeing, who are experiencing in various ways inaccessibility. And so it one ensures that I have reason to be in this job and there's work to do. And so that was encouraging, but also it made me feel as if there's definitely efforts that are needed to address staff concerns that maybe haven't been addressed in the past. And so wanting to really dig into that staff dissatisfaction. In particular, what we also asked about was the public accommodations process, reasonable accommodations for events, in particular, reasonable accommodations for public tour routes and access to any sort of council sanctioned events, these types of meetings where people had the opportunity to share whether or not they felt they had access to provide public input. A lot of staff asked that they wanted to know
just
more.
to be clear on this, on what we're looking at here, this
Yeah.
is the ADA survey findings for the Met Council as a whole.
Yes.
So this is transit, this is our buildings, environmental service, the whole kit and caboodle. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah. So we asked for the top areas of improvement. So we specifically wanted to know where folks felt we needed the most improvements. Metro Transit was number one. Public amenities at council facilities, including doors, restrooms, and service counters, was number two. So that got a lot of findings on that. And that did include our environmental services facilities as well. Employees who felt like they didn't have adequate access to the work environment. Getting through the door, enough accessible parking, things like that. Digital accessibility was a big issue too, so making sure that our websites and the content on those sites are digitally accessible. We rely heavily on PowerPoints and PDFs, and oftentimes those aren't accessible for those who are visually impaired and relying on screen readers, and so really wanting to get a strong handle on that. And that's definitely work that the council is undertaking. I'm leading a couple of digital accessibility efforts right now. Employee meetings and events. So employees feeling like they have opportunities to fully engage across our divisions and in the meetings that occur. And then marketing and communication materials. So that's kind of an interesting one with environmental services, given the amount of collaboration that's done with municipalities and the amount of work that gets done on a local level that might include our brand, that we want to make sure that that information is digitally accessible, and to what degree we have some input on that are things that, you know, many might not be thinking about, but definitely falls under environmental services purview, as far as making sure that our services and the way that we are promoting our work is done so in an accessible way. Next slide. So a bit more. So we asked people to highlight specific priority areas. What were their top priority areas? So Metro Transit came in number 1, Metro Mobility, and then websites, and then parks and public housing number 4. Interestingly, I think with employees, there were quite a few comments again about access to employee work areas within our environmental services facilities, and an interest in looking at alternative ways of conducting our public tour routes. Looking at accessible mapping, looking at greater reference to allowing for reasonable accommodations and considering alternate tour routes instead of kind of one particular route that may include stairs. Really looking to see if there's a way we can mitigate somebody's experience on a tour route. There were definitely some concerns too from employees about the certain aspects of tour routes and level of ambient noise, the smells, things like that, when you're considering people with certain disabilities that might have a heightened sense of smell that might turn them away from fully experiencing a public tour route. Those are the kinds of things that were that are vital to understand, because that's public tours are a critical way for the public to understand what we do in the environmental services realm, and it's hard to really for the average individual to understand what we do around environmental services, and public tours are a great way of people experiencing that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, JQP, it's Julie Corva Peterson Incorporated. They're the organization, the accessibility specialists that conducted this work as a small team, a mom and daughter primarily. As I mentioned, they're an MCUB, so this is a woman-owned local business. And they conducted this their site evaluations at over 400 locations in under 6 months. So they did quite a bit of work, and we met at least on a monthly basis, certainly a lot of communication on a weekly basis by phone and email. They were wonderful. I won't speak too much for our environmental services team, but I thought that they did an amazing job of really understanding what is required at our environmental services facilities and engaging as many people as possible in the process to fully understand what kind of work we can do to improve the accessibility of our environmental services work. So next slide, please. So report findings, as I mentioned, each facility received a report, include the deficiency as well as the code and design standard related to that deficiency, and then their barrier priority levels. And those results are being incorporated into the transition plan. Those recommendations were based on a 4-level severity level, with 1 being the most significant. There were over 2,500 barriers identified across the 400 locations in the reports that we received. Priority 3 was the highest. I just wanted to share a bit about the definitions that JQP used. So priority 1, these are issues of highest concern. So these are barriers to people to even participate at all in a program, activity, or service. However, these are easy to modify and they're inexpensive. So priority 1 being kind of low-hanging fruit, really get these out of the way. There weren't too many of those. JQP had mentioned that there were, I think, 2% of all of the findings were barrier or priority 1, so that was encouraging for us. Priority 2, this is a barrier for a significant number of individuals with disabilities. It's easy to modify and inexpensive. However, it it impacted several individuals, but when looking at the number of public members who utilized that program or service, it was less so than priority one. Priority three, these are provide convenience of accessibility. This is drinking fountains, toilet rooms, entrances, things like that, where in these particular instances, there were few people that were accessing those elements. And there was a greater amount of time to actually provide reasonable accommodations if there was a particular event at that location that you can find an alternate spot for that event. Priority four is this is really required for new construction, but in existing buildings, it doesn't necessarily critically affect the impact of program accessibility. So this is in particular around employee access areas and or items that were significant enough where it wouldn't be financially feasible to undertake any sort of remediations because it would be a significant overhaul to a facility that may possibly alter the fundamental nature of what it's attempting to conduct. So with that, I will pass it over to Dan Fick to specifically talk about some of the barriers we identified at our environmental services facilities. Thanks.
Welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Environmental Committee. My name is Dan Fick. I am a principal engineer in environmental services, working in the technical service area, mostly on interceptor projects. And I wanted to give you a brief update on how this has been happening in the environmental services division and what we're doing. So during the evaluation phase, my primary role was to facilitate and just track that and make sure JQP had access to everything they needed to because our plants, there's security, they have to be able to get through security, they have to be escorted oftentimes. So helping with that. Once that was completed, now we're in the process of taking all the items that were the results of the evaluation and organizing them and figuring out how we're going to mitigate them and process them through the through the years to come. So I wanted to talk a little bit about public versus private. Guthrie touched on it. And just so you can kind of keep it clear, because I get a lot of questions on well, aren't our facilities, we don't have customers coming in, so how does that work for us? So what we determined to be the public areas were the tour routes and then the facilities in which we host meetings where people from outside the organization attend. So this is primarily administrative buildings at our plants, those kinds of things. So between tours and those meetings, I believe those were the second and fourth ranked results of the survey for places where accessibility work was needed for us. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. So it wasn't we weren't wondering whether or not a substation somewhere needed to have an accessible entrance or something. So then as far as environmental services go, we evaluated 9 plants, all 9 of our plants, and we also included 4 office sites. That would be the regional maintenance office, the Metro 94, this building, and the Jackson Street building next door. So looking forward at 2020, the way we'll be addressing these is first, we'll go after the low-hanging fruit, like Guthrie said. We'll make programmatic or just sort of the easy changes. If a person who's taking a tour is not good at doing stairs, the tour guides will know to just modify the tour route and try and get to the same location without using stairs. Those are the really easy things to do. The next probably most common one will be using work orders. So issuing work orders to do things like lower paper towel dispenser holders or replace hardware on toilet stall doors to meet the ADA requirements of those. And they're able to make large scale purchases. We have staff who can do it, and we can self-perform a lot of this. So that will be another one of the strategies we'll use. On some of the bigger areas, so one of the example was the Blue Lake Administration Building. That was a building that was built, I believe, in the 60s. It was before there really were any accessibility codes in force. So the Blue Lake Admin Building has very little in way of accessibility routes or facilities in it. So our third way of addressing things like this are taking on a project where we either renovate the building or replace the building, and in one fell swoop, we will address all of the issues that were identified for that building simply by replacing it with something that is compliant. The fourth way would be if there's not a capital project nearby and it's a significant enough expenditure, we would contract for it and use either budgeted money or there is some money available that's been budgeted for OEO that has been getting used for some of the things like the automatic doors that Guthrie talked about, and just basically contracting for it separately. A real common example of that would be if we have a sidewalk that has a broken piece, or if there's a gap in the sidewalk that isn't compliant. We really can't do concrete work ourselves very easily, so just contracting that kind of thing out is how we'd handle that. So then moving past 2020, we would be doing all those same things. The only other strategy that we can use beyond that is as items wear out, get broken, become obsolete, those things, as we replace those, we can replace those with a compliant replacement. So the signage is a real common way for this to, or a real common example of that. And did I skip a slide? I think I went past the photos. I started on the photos, and I didn't even talk about them. So here's two examples of the kinds of things that JQP addressed. So the photo on the left is a handicap parking stall, obviously, and the noted deficiency was the height of the sign, but there's probably a half dozen different regulations about signs and striping and whatnot with handicapped spots. So a single spot like that could account for 2, 3, 4, or 5 separate line items on the self-evaluation report. So, but handicap parking spots was a real common one. And then again, like I talked about on tour routes, this is a photo of where you would access a stop on a tour route by taking stairs. So a way to mitigate this would be to mount a photo or a mirror or possibly even a camera so that someone who isn't able to take those stairs could still see and experience the same things that the people who were up above looking at. I believe there's a tank at the top of those stairs. Ideally, we'd be able to access that same tank from a route that didn't require stairs, but if that were not possible, that's what we would do. And I think making improvements to our tour routes like that makes them a much more rich experience, and it gives us the ability to really demonstrate the value we do add to our customers. So that's what I have. We'd be happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Questions? Please.
I'd be interested to know if you had any observations as far as did you discover that there was issues with, parks, amenities, or stuff in environmental services that was recently constructed? And I guess just to put a frame on this, the city of St. Paul, some of you may have noticed that or read in the news in December that they just installed new parking meters, and now they're having to remove the parking meters at a cost of like $45,000 and got fine of $200,000 as a result of a lawsuit to do that, right? And just curious to know what kind of safeguards are in place that when we do new construction, we're certain that we don't have that same experience.
I'm not aware of any instances of that, and the ADA requirements are stipulated through the building code. So anything we do that needs to adhere to the building code, obviously is going to be inspected by the city and whatnot. I think there's areas where you can stray into that. One of those gray areas is if we have a construction project and we disrupt a sidewalk or something, that could potentially be something where either new or current construction impacts what was a previously accessible route, and if we don't restore that, you could have an issue where we'd want to come back and make sure that. But as far as if anything was built like you described, I'm not aware of any.
And just to follow up, I just want to applaud the Met Council for creating a position at the council that's dedicated to this, because I think you look at the cost of potential litigation and redoing work that maybe would have been done improperly, and to get at it at the front end, I think probably ends up saving resources in the long run. Thank you.
It's financially the right thing to do, and it's just the right thing to do, period. Yeah, please.
Mr. Chair, I want to second Councilmember Fredson's praise. I spent close to 6 months, actually more than 6 months, dealing with what turned out to be a fractured heel 6 years ago, and went from a boot to a cast to a boot, and learned the hard way, but briefly, about what mobility challenges can mean in terms of quality of life and getting around and feeling a part of the community. Council members Lee and Zirin and I participated in some conversations a couple of weeks ago regarding neurological challenges that some of our neighbors and people who use our systems face, as well as mobility issues. And I think as our community becomes more mobile, we are strengthened as a result of the ADA. And I hope that as an organization, we can figure out some way to celebrate this 30th anniversary, not only to adhere to its requirements, but to really celebrate what it means to our community. The challenges we have in Minnesota with snow and ice make it tough, but for the employees of the Met Council and the cities and counties and townships we serve, the work that's done to keep snow and ice and everything out of the way is remarkable, and their work ought to also be a part of that 30-year celebration. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that. And certainly snow is one that I see regularly as not within the purview of this committee, but that continues to be a huge issue for us. And I remember a couple of years ago, maybe a year, 2 years ago, there was an article in the Star Tribune, Pioneer Press, one of them, about these transition plans.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading this article and thinking, what the heck? Why do we still have a transition plan? Or why it was about why cities or parks or both haven't done all of the things in their transition plan. I'm thinking, like, dude, the ADA passed 30 years ago. How much time do you need to do these things? And I still think that to a certain extent, like local governments, parks, probably have been, and maybe the Met Council is guilty to a certain extent of not doing things quick enough. But also what I'm hearing again tonight is that it's constantly evolving, like the hearing loops that you mentioned, or what are the other, like digital accessibility, like things that we weren't really thinking about in 1990, 91, 92 when this was passed, are now things that we have to and should be dealing with today. So, so this has been enlightening, and yeah, certainly applaud our efforts to date and our efforts to continue to mitigate these 2,500 different barriers that were brought up, because boy, that's a lot. We got our work cut out for us, and I don't know if we'll ever get to zero, but we can try, right? And as many others have said, like this benefits. Oftentimes, these improvements benefit all of us, right? I mean, think about all the different times we've pushed the button to open up the door. If you've got a baby stroller or a large box or something like that, or really clear signage, right? That benefits everybody. So I'm anxious to see our progress on this issue move forward. Yeah, please.
I just had kind of a general question, but it's related to Guthrie. But like from titles 1 through 5, do you administer those as well, or is there different people that do admin on those?
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, I administer or oversee that, with Title One being employment. I work closely with occupational health and our HR regarding disability complaints from employees and things like that. We have an investigation resolutions unit, but for all intents and purposes, all of that work is housed under the Office of Equal Opportunity that I work out of.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you for the clarification.
Other questions? Very good. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
I imagine you're making a similar presentation to the other committees or to the council as a whole, and
Yes,
transportation and
in the next couple weeks.
excellent. Thank you.
Great.
All right, that brings us to the general manager's report.
So I thought I would comment quickly on PFAS. So last week I happened to be at an event that the director of Office of Wastewater Management with EPA was speaking at, and one of the contaminants of concern that got discussed was PFAS. And I'll just say that, you had Councilmember Bento had commented on the schedule for our PCA and why we're not moving faster. And EPA is moving as fast as they can on this issue as well. They have significant resources devoted to it to make this happen ASAP, but most of the work so far has been focused on drinking water because that's the first critical issue to address. So determining the right analytical methods to use in the different wastewater, whether it's solid waste or an actual wastewater stream, is one of their first challenges. So it was interesting to talk to the other utilities. Most don't know what they do or don't have because they're not sure how to go about testing it or where they should proceed. So it's definitely going to be an issue that's going to have a lot of action and attention in this next year. And we're going to know a lot more, certainly a year from now, than we do today.
Yeah.
And hopefully in that we can come up with some solutions and the best way to handle biosolids and effluent.
On that topic, I think maybe we were talking after the last meeting about this PFAS issue, and we were talking at the meeting about different companies that impact the wastewater run or the drinking water run PFAS, and it occurred to me we use a lot of chemicals for our wastewater treatment processes, and it'd be interesting to know like how the chemicals that we use, what are we incorporating aspects of green chemistry into our wastewater treatment processes? I'm sure our own chemicals have become greener over the years, but and I don't know much about it to speak about it. I'm not even sure I know what I'm asking, but I'm wondering if there's around PFAS, do we contribute to the problem in any way? Is there ways that we can, if we do, then is there ways that we can lessen that? or just, I guess, a broader question around the chemicals that we use to do what we absolutely need to do is kind of what's the cutting edge around green chemistry? And as for a future topic of discussion, I guess.
Well, I can say I can bring that up with staff in terms of the best way for us to maybe do an info item on that. I do know that anything that's regulated with county and different requirements in terms of reporting, but we, several years ago, did a project where we looked at the stain and grease work that we do with all of our facilities. There's a fair amount of mechanical work, and we went to a newer version of degreaser. So there's things that we've done in the past. Off the top of my head, would not be very good at trying to illuminate those, but we certainly can look at bringing some more information on what we've done to go to less hazardous materials in our own operations.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Mr. Chair, after that conversation that night, I went home. I had a load of laundry to do, so I started taking a look at all of the laundry and cleaning products that I've got. And for the most part, you can't look at the label on these items and know what's in them. You have to take the time and energy to go online and find what is used to make them, which I have to tell you I resent. Because who has time to do that? And why aren't they putting those items on their labels? I have to say it's a real source of frustration. But one of the things that we as an organization could do is either support or create resources that provide consumers with information about the products they're using so that we have a good idea of what's healthy for our water systems and what isn't. And we could make informed choices about the products we buy without spending a crazy amount of time looking it up individually. Just have a kind of a one-stop check-in to figure it out. So just a thought.
Yeah, on that point, the other day I went to the household hazardous waste facility in Ramsey County, which is a great facility, and you can pick up products that have been dropped off that are still good. And there happened to be like 10 bottles of dishwasher cleaner, and so I grabbed a bunch of them, right? It's free. And I got them home, and then I looked at the label of what I had picked up and compared to what we were using. And what I picked up has like 5% phosphorus. And the one we have been buying has 0. And what I've learned here over the last year is like, that's not good. Maybe I should just drive this back to the household hazardous waste facility and just give it back to them. Because I'm now a more informed consumer about what goes through the dishwasher eventually ends up in the Mississippi River when you're in Falcon Heights or anywhere in Minnesota. Yeah, but other times it's not quite as clear on those labels. So, point well taken. Please.
Yeah, just add to the discussion, but a lot of times the best cleanings are things that you can make at home, with our basic, whether it's vinegar or, cleaning compounds, and they're on site, but that when you know what's in them, it's usually a lot safer with it. It's like what you do with our food, where you don't find the high fructose corn syrup, put it back, but it's really hard to do that, So.
Good point. Well, thank you, everybody. Anything else from the general manager's report?
That's it for today.
Good to go. Okay, that means we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.